Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining in here. We may still have some more people jump in. I will try to start around 6, if not a few minutes after, if I feel like there might be more students joining. So if you can, do your best if you are attending class to come around that 6 o'clock mark. Otherwise, we'll get started and you join when you join. But I might just be a bit slow to let you in if I'm kind of going through a slide or chatting to someone. So are there any questions kicking off this evening that have come up for you over the week? Anything you've thought of since we met last Tuesday? Anything at all in this space? No? Okay, that's fine. As with our classes, I'll start by acknowledging the lands that I'm on. So I'm on the lands of the Dharawal people. Pay my respects to elders who have passed, who are current and who are emerging, and also extend that welcome and acknowledge Aboriginal people, First Nations people who are joining in the class this evening. With our class, if you're here in our evening space, it is helpful to me that you do have your cameras on where you are at your computer, unless you've let me know something's going on for you, and that's okay. But just let me know if that's the case. Otherwise, I hope to see your faces here in the class space. We will have breakout room activities this evening. If that's not a space for you, if you could message me ahead of making the groups, that will be helpful for me to organize that. If something comes up for you that feels a little bit ick, feel free to take what you need to take to care for yourself in the space. If that means walking away for a moment or two, please just send me a message so I know that you're okay. It might be words to the effect of, felt a little something, taking a break, I'll be back in 5. And that's okay. Feelings are feelings. I want you to acknowledge them and take care of you here in this space and with everything you do as well, especially working in this field with clients where we give out a lot and we need to care for ourselves as well. This is session 3 of 4 of Assess Coexisting Needs. Last week we covered sessions 1 and 2. So if you're looking at the PowerPoint presentations, there were 1 and 2 there. This is 3, and we'll cover 4 next week. So tonight there are some breakout room activities. When you go into the breakout spaces, I encourage you, if you haven't met someone or someones in that space before, to introduce yourself, however that looks for you. Some guiding ideas are your name, maybe where you live in terms of state, for example, maybe what you do for work, maybe what you do for fun. They're just examples if that works for you. But when you come to class, there will be breakout spaces probably more times than not. So you will be in that space working with sometimes someone you've met online or in person, and sometimes someone you haven't met. So if that works for you to introduce yourself in that way, I encourage you to do so, especially if you're looking to work with a peer to organize your role plays where you might meet up at another time online, in person, and you might do a recording of a role play for an assessment, or you might practice your skills without a recording, or you might just meet up to have a study group. Whatever it is, if you're in that space, having the time together here might help to just get to know each other a little bit more. So I encourage you tonight, if you're with someone you haven't met, to think about if that's available to you to introduce yourself. Tonight we cover legal and ethical considerations. We cover standard or some documentation you might come across, and also individual development plans. Just bear with me a moment. All right, we get started with the breakout space and an activity. So on the next slide, next two slides I'm going to show you, I'm going to ask you to take a screenshot, a photo on your phone, quickly write it down. I don't know, whatever works for you, but taking a photo or a screenshot is probably the best method, because when you go into the breakout space, you're going to need to have that information there. So I'll read through the case study. And while I'm doing that, you might like to take a screenshot of that. And then as I move to the next slide, it'll show questions and ask you to respond to the questions. Sorry, I think there was a question. It's hard to get the chat bar up at times. Does someone want to ask that question out loud? I just can't get my chat bar up at this second.
Hi, Christina. I was just wondering whether the questions could be typed in the chat.
That would take
There's
me
only a
typing
couple.
every single word. So let me
Okay.
see if I can copy and paste it. I don't have access to just copy images kind of thing or upload things. So let me see if I can do that. Is it available to you to take a screenshot?
Yeah, I try and leave my phone in the other room, but yeah.
Okay, sure. All right. Let me see. I mean, someone will have taken it when you get into the breakout space, but I'll leave it on the screen, then I'll bring it down. I'll see if I can throw it in the chat.
Yeah. Thanks.
Cool. Thank you. Okay, this is our case study. This is Ben. Ben is an elderly man living in a Department of Housing property with his daughter Liz, who is his primary caregiver. Shout out now if the term primary caregiver is unknown. Happy to explain any term that comes up. Are we okay with that term? There's some nods. No's. Cool. I'm gonna need some responses from you guys, whether that's your faces or audio, if I ask at different times. So Ben, Department of Housing Property with Liz, primary caregiver. Ben has a back injury and has been confined to a wheelchair for the past 10 years. Ben has dementia, which causes him to become aggressive sometimes, and he has trouble expressing his emotions. This has led to him being socially reclusive. Another term for reclusive is withdrawn or socially isolated, potentially, not engaging in society and with peers, family, and so on. Because of this, Ben has been smoking excessively for the past few years. Liz is starting part-time work soon and cannot assist Ben with all his daily activities, especially transportation, as they need to accommodate the wheelchair. Liz is not sure what type of care Ben needs. So Ben lives with daughter, primary caregiver, is going to have a change in circumstances in terms of Liz providing some care. He'll be out of the house soon, but Ben has a few coexisting needs. Ben has a few things going on for him that would, in a holistic approach, would need to be considered. Now, if dementia is an area, for example, that you don't know a lot about, I'm happy to talk through just that super briefly without going into the DSM, Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Or of course, you can always Google or ask someone in your group. So shout out if that's something you want me to explain, not a problem. Happy to explain anything. I just need to know from you what I can help with. So in 5 seconds, I'm moving to the next screen. If you haven't taken a photo. All right, these are your questions. What assessment tools could be used to assess Ben's level of disability and care support? Last week, we looked at some assessment tools. If you think back, or if you look at that material, or you just Google assessment tools, what could be useful in this situation? Now, thinking about the assessment tools and who can administer them, you as a caseworker Or does a general practitioner, a psychologist or a psychiatrist or an occupational therapist need to administer a tool? Not a problem if you want to use a tool like that. I just ask you to think about, well, if it's an OT, make sure you share that in that group space together, that you would need to look at a referral to an occupational therapist as well. Now, forget about sort of funding and service location and things like that. Not that we have endless amount in this situation or ever, but I want you to be mindful that that's a thing when we work with clients. But just think about answering these questions as if you have the resources, the funding to do so. So number 2 is outline the information that you've gathered about Ben from the scenario. I want you to comment on the physical, psychological, residential, and social needs. So what are those physical needs? And some of these responses will be quite short, maybe 5 words, maybe 1 sentence type thing. Number 3, what should be the role of the carer that Liz obtains? So Liz and Ben will need to acquire a new carer for Ben. What type of caring role should that be? Should that be live-in? Should that be drop-in? How many times a week, a day, and so on? What are the needs that carer should be aware of, and what needs should they be trying to meet? Think about someone in a wheelchair. Go back and think about, well, what was the reason in Ben's case that he was in the wheelchair? What are the needs of someone who might be have a physical disability like that? What risk factors exist in this scenario? A big key one that screams out is some of the aggressive behavior that Ben might engage in. Number 5, how could Liz and the carer help Ben achieve the following goals? So these are the targets that you're trying to address in this question: increasing social networks and reducing intake of cigarettes. What specialist support could Ben use to help with the above goals? And lastly, how can Ben be supported and encouraged to access these services? So in tonight's session, we will cover a little bit of the strength-based approach. We've talked about that before. I know that in past subjects it's been covered as well. So hopefully it might be swimming around in your mind somewhere, but we're looking at how we can support Ben. Now, Ben possibly won't be able to take himself to a service, but can he make a phone call? Can he be present during a phone call of a referral? He should be present when a practitioner comes to the house, or you're taking Ben to a facility where you've made a referral. And then should the carer not be available all of the time, how might Ben access services? Could services be delivered online? Now, I don't want you to guess in a way. I want you to look up different services and think about, oh, well, if Ben was referred to this type of service, whatever you find, what kind of support could they offer? Would it be in the home? Would it be in the community? Would it be helping Ben to get somewhere, as in providing transport? I want you to look up what type of organizations might be around. You can write down names of organizations. Wonderful, that's perfectly fine. But I don't want you to make up a wonderful organization that does all the things possible. They don't exist unless you create them with lots of money. But I want you to do some research in, or write down what you know, if you are familiar with different services around, some services that might be suitable for Ben. So in 5 seconds, I'm bringing this down and I'll attempt to put them in the chat.
No, that's fine, Christina. That's a lot more than last week. That's fine.
Oh, you've got them?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Cool. Thank you, Nathan. All right, so I am going to create some rooms. You will get the pop-up in about a minute. But just let me know if I'm not already aware, if you may not be participating in a group. And if you're not in a group, I'll be in this space. I'll have my camera off. I take this space to work out our next activities or content or anything. So I ask you to, if you're not in a group, to think about these things as well. I appreciate if group spaces aren't for you, but I do want you to take some learning as well. So think about these questions in relation to Ben. Okay, let's pause our recording. For those catching the recording, we've had our breakout space. We looked at Ben. We responded to these questions. I wasn't quick enough to hit the record earlier. We didn't have our wonderful chat, but I'm sure our peers, when you catch up with them, can share this information as well. Now, looking at the assessment process. This is very broad, not detailed, which is fine, very high level of what might be involved in the assessment process. And assessment can happen in different ways and at different times. A lot of the times, clients will be assessed to partake in a service. So if you, for example, Danny mentioned day programs often will come with criteria, certain ailments that have been diagnosed, certain levels of those conditions. There might be a requirement or I guess an intake of certain genders, maybe just male, maybe just female, maybe there might be an age bracket. Maybe there might be different functions that are okay or maybe not best suited to that day program. If you've got a day program that focuses on physical activity, wonderful. Just purely speaking, someone like Ben might not be the best service for Ben. However, if you've ever played wheelchair basketball or wheelchair anything sport, it's incredibly difficult and incredibly fun. I encourage you to give it a go, but there are options for that. But just broadly, paintbrushing, someone in a wheelchair, not going to be in the best place to maybe play soccer, for example. So different programs, different organizations will probably have an assessment process to see if a client is best suited for that service. People also may be assessed based on funding needs. A lot of funding happens through the NDIS these days. When I started working in this field, NDIS wasn't around. It came maybe 5 years into my work, 4 or 5 years. But pre the NDIS and in the NDIS growing, the organizations I worked for had funding from the government, from donations, from community providers and so on. And people, programs or different types of programs were funded. So I might have mentioned last week the term HASI, Housing and Support Initiative. This is a program that still runs, just funded a little bit differently to when I was working in it. And people are assessed on different tiers. So for example, at the time, the highest tier had about 5 or 6 hours of support needs per week in this service. So every client who was assessed on the highest tier of about 5 or 6 hours a week would receive 5 or 6 hours a week. Now, the wonderful thing about how funding used to be is the organization was able to maneuver things around. And if a client is assessed for 5 hours, for example, that's not necessarily 5 hours of face-to-face contact. That time includes making referrals, travel time to take clients somewhere, or if the client lives quite a while away from the service that you're working in, that travel time is included. It will be case noting. All of that is included in hours. And the same thing in the NDIS, all of that is included in hours. So if a person has 10, 20, 30 hours, admin generally is included in that as well. But in pre-NDIS funding, because people were allocated the hours and it wasn't their money per se, or their hours per se, if a client didn't want to see us, if a client had everything they needed, if an appointment got cut short for hopefully positive reasons, we were able to maneuver those hours around. So for example, someone assessed on the lower tier scale, I believe was 2 hours a fortnight, so 1 hour a week, which is not a great deal. However, this is for a person that probably lives independently or probably has a lot of support needs around, can do a lot of things, what we might call daily living skills, can do a lot of those skills, but maybe wants assistance to engage or work on employment needs or engage in social needs, for example. So they might have 1 hour a week or be assessed as that. And then maybe 1 week they attend an additional program, which might make another hour for the week, which means 2 hours for the week. So what we could do was kind of move that funding around. It wasn't as complicated as maybe I'm making it out to be. It was quite simple and totally legal and above the books. I wouldn't be saying things that were wrong or unethical. But it was a great chance to be able to support people who maybe were assessed for less time to occasionally have a bit more time. And if someone is just sick of seeing me for 5 or 6 hours a week and is okay, then why stand around harassing them unnecessarily? Even clients who have maybe more higher level needs or need a bit more time and care, they are still human and they still get upset and they still get happy and they still feel tired of seeing a worker for 6 hours a week. Yeah, so they're still human beings. So they're allowed to have feelings and say, I'm tired, I've had enough. Yeah, we don't force services on people. We strongly recommend, hey, I know you're kicking me out, but also we haven't done all of the things that we were planning to do today. Maybe can we have a quick chat about it before I leave? Because that's really important as well. Like showering today, you haven't done yet. Is that something we can do? If let's look at that and let's look at prepping a meal and then I'll get out of your hair. And then you kind of negotiate. And that's okay for clients to have feelings when they want to be left alone safely. And they've got the care needs for themselves. So this assessment process here is very broad in terms of what we might do, whether a client is coming into a service for the first time and we're assessing, are they suitable or what kind of funding needs are there for them. This might be moving to a different program or a different service. And if another service is made a referral to, then they'll conduct an assessment process as well. In preparation for assessment, it's important that you consider your organization's policies and procedures. Is there any pre-existing information that you have? Can you get information from families and other members of support for this person? And what are the practical aspects in terms of completing that assessment? Is this over the phone? Is there some over the phone, some in person? Is this in person? Is this at the service, the actual location you work at? Is this over Teams? Is this in the client's home? Have we risk assessed? Is it safe for you to go to the client's home? All of this is considered in assessment. Some services have a 2-person visit for the first time. Some services have a 2-person visit ongoingly, depending on the needs or the risks of the client or the skill level of the worker as well. Someone who's on their first day in the organization, if they've got experience elsewhere, if they don't, probably best they do what we call a buddy shift, where for the first day at least, potentially the first week, maybe meeting clients for the first time, irrespective of first week, third week, and so on. That can be really helpful to pair with another worker so that you can have that introduction and that rapport building, and you can have that safety element for everyone involved. We'll watch this video and then we'll take a break. So let me pause our recording. Okay, kicking back off. What I'm sharing with you here, this video is not the video that was scheduled to play. Cannot find that. It should be sent out with the information you receive tomorrow or the next day when you get the video recording and you get the slides. However, I've got another one. It does focus on a person who's more of a medical practitioner kind of thing, but the holistic approach remains the same. This does talk about a person with cancer and her experience. I mean, when I say person, I mean, we've got this in cartoon form, but this could be and will be someone's story somewhere. So I'll post this link in the chat, but for those catching the recording, you'll see the video that you're supposed to see, but you obviously won't see this because I'm going to pause the recording now. If you're working with clients who have those multiple needs, then they're going to come with the need to meet the need for a person to be healthy, to be well, to be safe. And they're going to come with the anxieties and the stresses and the frustrations and the ups and the downs that come with seeing multiple service providers, seeing multiple caseworkers and case managers, going to this service and that one and that one. If someone is under NDIS funding, are they working out, or is their family working out where all their funding goes? Or have they got a case manager to do that? Remember that case manager comes at a cost in the funding as well. So in holistic assessment, we're looking at the client needs and the client as a whole, as much as the client will and does tell us and do tell us. If you feel a client is not sharing with you information that you think could be helpful, or you just get a sense, I feel like there's more, or you know there's more because a family member may have spoken to you about more, think about your approach. Are you doing and saying the best things? Are you creating that safe environment for someone to share? Are you acknowledging fears and worries? Are you acknowledging past concerns people have had with service providers? Are you recognizing where the client is at on their journey, whether that be through change or whether that be different medications or different support needs? Are you the very first support worker that they've ever seen because maybe it's a new diagnosis or they haven't had treatment? Or are you caseworker number 99? And that comes with a whole lot of telling my story and sharing experiences and going through a treatment approach type thing. So if you feel like you're missing information, ask politely, be curious, but non-invasive, and be respectful of where the client is at. A client might say, yeah, that's it in so many ways, and you still feel that's not it. And you say, okay. Obviously, there's something you're doing or not doing that isn't the most beneficial. It could be the smallest of things, and it also could not be you at all. It could be all of those things I spoke about of the client's past experiences or where they're at, or they take a little bit longer to trust a service provider. Fine. You keep showing up and being consistent, the client will open up and share that information with you. There are some situations where you may not be able to progress a client. They might be the first assessment and you can't progress them in the service because you're missing information. It doesn't happen all that often to miss key information about diagnosis, about treatment, about history, about family, about lots of things. It doesn't happen all that often, but that could be a possibility. You might need to explain that to a client. These are the requirements or what we look for or what our service provision is to support clients. From what I'm hearing from you, I'm not hearing some of those health concerns or life concerns or treatment approaches to be eligible for our service. Very simply put, maybe a client isn't telling you their age and you have an age requirement. Maybe you only work with people under 18, for example, so you kind of need that information. Danny.
Yeah, I get it and agree with asking all those questions and getting all the information, but I guess I'm collecting or talking about relevant information or remembering what service you can provide is important. There's no point spending a whole appointment talking about housing if you're not the housing provider. There are times where you need to, maybe it comes up and you've got that information and you make sure they've got another support in place for that.
Yep. You are correct. Yeah. You don't want to ask 100 questions at the first appointment ever, even if you need to cover 100 questions. And you're absolutely right. If we're not a provider that works with housing, that might not be a relevant question. It might be suitable to understand the client needs overall.
Yeah.
But if that's not something that you do,
or a medical issue or something that's not it's not your area of expertise, it's like, have you got an appointment with your GP and make sure that you can check in that they're receiving support for that, but it's not the best use of your time to spend start case managing something that's outside your area either.
Yes, you are correct in that. Thank you. And it makes me think of another thing in terms of medical, in terms of biological, as someone has diabetes, someone has a heart condition. These are relevant to a person and their needs, unless you are a medical practitioner and operating as a medical practitioner specializing in diabetes, for example. You do not need to know the ins and outs. As Danny put, are they getting the right care from the right people at the right time? Yes or no? If that's no, hey, I think getting ongoing management for diabetes is important. What do we think about getting you connected with another general practitioner, for example? But you do not need to know the ins and outs of medical conditions like that.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for bringing that up. Any other thoughts coming up for people?
Me. Just thinking of it can be used as sort of a blocking, almost a tactic by a client sometimes where, or they'll just keep complaining or they're stuck on one subject as well, and again, that's not your thing. So you're needing to move people on, or if you want to help them with one thing and they're, but this person or this situation, and it's something stopping them from moving forward.
Yeah, great point. Have you guys covered case management or case management principles yet? Anywhere in another subject? No? No? Okay, cool. I won't go into it because it means it's coming up and it's super fun. But an element to case management is recognizing crisis. And there's crisis that you can see and is real for you as the practitioner, and there is crisis that is perceived by the client. Now, we don't call someone out and say that's a load of bull. That's not a real crisis, or you're not really going through something. When I say crisis, I typically mean something that's happened quite acutely, something quite immediately. Let's look at a client not paying their rent, and then the sheriffs have come because the landlord has sent 600 notices, and that's it. The sheriff has come and the client has to vacate the premises immediately. That is a crisis. That is one that, broadly speaking, could have been prevented or assisted if it's a case of finances, working with the client long before, but whether they've shared that or not with you. And if you have no idea and they haven't told anyone, then you obviously can't help. Yeah. So with crisis and that point around, what people want to share with you and want to stay on talking, whether that's helpful or unhelpful, clients sometimes present in a crisis. If you work with young people, I mean, you know, teenagers, adolescents, just about everything is a crisis for a teenager. This is just general life for teenagers. If you think back to your teenage days, I'm sure you made crises over lots of things because it was real for you. No shame. I did it. But clients, adolescents who have AOD concerns, who have housing concerns, who have issues in their family unit, lots of things can present as crisis, and they're quite real and they are important. They might be impactful. They might need some attention, whether it's right now, maybe could be debated. Now, when we get to that subject, we'll talk about crisis management and working through that perceived crisis situation. We acknowledge feelings. We acknowledge that that's real for a person. Tell me what you can tell me. Everything is helpful, that I might be able to help you through it. We'll talk more in detail. So if someone is staying in that moment of just talking about the same thing over and over, that's probably not helpful and not beneficial to progress assessment or the working relationship with the client. There's going to be a time where you need to call that out gently, politely, respectfully. You know, you might say words to the effect of, John, we've been talking about this for some time. You know, it's been an hour so far today, and every time you come in, you talk about this, and we don't get to talk about other things that I think are important in terms of the support we can provide. Because if we don't talk about these things, we're not working on those goals that you wanted to. Or sidebar, if a client is mandated to your service and you're not working on things, they can be subject to be back in front of a magistrate, back in front of a judge, and the judge says, hey, haven't worked on all the things you said. This is no good. Pal, this is no good. And they'll make a decision from there. So there's ways around moving through that. Again, people could be scared. People could not be trusting. People could be not understanding the concept of what you're trying to get across, whether that be a language barrier, an intellect barrier, an age barrier, a gender barrier. So many things could be possible in that space. And yes, and we can look at crises and different aspects of mental health. And there are some mental health conditions, for example, someone diagnosed with paranoia might perceive a lot of things as quite intense or crisis or immediate as part of their diagnosis, and they will receive, ideally, some treatment through that, whether that be medication or talking therapy or things like that. So any other thoughts while I bring up our slides? Collaboration is always going to be something we talk about. Why try and do something all by yourself when you may not be skilled and qualified to do so? And that's not a bad thing. And you only have 7-8 hours of work a day, and you might have more than one client to work with in that space. So why do things like an island? You're not out there all alone. You don't have to save the world all by yourself. You don't have to fix the client all by yourself. When we're working with clients, think about pulling in everybody possible that's relevant to the team. Now, this could be actually part of your team that you work with in your organization. And there are organizations that have what we call multidisciplinary teams, where they have people of different professions within the one organization. Think hospitals. In the mental health ward, you will find lots of health professionals, lots of different health professionals. Or this might be making referrals to other services. So I really encourage you, what is best for the client? What meets their needs? What's in their funding provision? What's in their service provision? What do they want to do, and who do they want to be involved with? And think about making those connections and keeping them up. medical professionals have less of a desire to share information with you, and that's not a bad thing. That's a confidentiality thing. They are bound by kind of more rigid confidentiality than what we are as if we're working in a caseworker, community worker type role. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing. Also recognize what consent the client has agreed to with you sharing information and, let's say, a psychologist sharing information. A psychologist will not share with you, no matter how nicely you ask and how much the client says is okay, will not share with you what they discuss in sessions, but they will give you an overview if there is consent that you're talking, the psychologist and the client is talking about goal setting, is talking about using a model like cognitive behavioral therapy, is planning another 6 sessions together, stuff like that. They might share, but they won't share the ins and outs. If the client wants to share information with you, lovely. I personally don't want to know, what is that? From the client, the ins and outs of their psychology session, their counseling session, their session with the general practitioner. If they've gone for a health checkup, wonderful, stop talking. That's all I need to know. Did it go okay? Were there outcomes that were okay or not okay for you? Do you have things that you have to follow up on that I can help with? So I really value clients wanting to share, but I respect that they don't need to share with me. And I don't find it beneficial to know the ins and outs of a psychology session, for example. So I say to clients, thank you, that's wonderful that you're sharing. Let's think about what can I help with, and then think about what we can talk about, because that is a safe space for you with the psychologist, and I want you to have that, just the two of you. I really value you sharing with me, but it's just not stuff I need to know, and I want you to keep that for yourself, because that's really important, and that's a good part of the process as well. And then if there are things I can help with, like, goal setting or getting to appointments or making referrals or making phone calls or working on employment, working on a resume, happy to help, happy to be informed of what you spoke about that is beneficial, that we can work on together. Also be mindful of who's doing what. Last week I spoke about case conferences where there'll be you and 5 other people, for example, including the client, maybe a family member or a friend, a support person for the client. Who does what? There will need to be a leader, if you like. Everybody wants to be the most important practitioner in the client's life, and everybody will think that they are the most important practitioner in the client's life. Not a problem. We don't need to shoot that down. But you might need to coordinate. So as the person who may not be providing a direct service, for example, you might be coordinating everyone, and you might be making notes and sharing that and providing information, for example, at a case conference, by organizing the time, getting all the people involved, moving along, if people get stuck talking about things in a bit too much detail or a bit too much. And then, looking at action. So psychologist Ben, you're going to set a couple of appointments with the client. GP Sarah, you're going to make an appointment to look at that health exam, and so on. You might be that coordinator of all the services, which is a great place to be. You just don't want 2 or 3 people doing the same 2 or 3 things, because it'll get messy and jumbled. Developing trust is a funny thing where I don't think I need to teach you, but for the purposes of just saying the words, I could teach you what goes into a trusting relationship in terms of being open and honest, being understanding of another person, being respectful, maintaining boundaries. But this is really demonstrated in how you behave and how you show up consistently, physically and metaphorically and emotionally, and how you show up for yourself too, and how you care for yourself. So it's really important, if you build relationships with other practitioners, if you build relationships with clients, maintain that. We all have off days. We all get sick, touch wood. We all have moments where we're not entirely ourselves or maybe entirely happy. That's being a human. But recognize that. And if you need the day off and you can take the day off, take the day off. If you need some time not seeing clients, talk to your supervisor about that. If you're having an off day, talk to someone at work about that. That comes with a caveat of how well do you know people and what's the environment about sharing things and all of that. So that needs to be considered. But, you know, it can be really helpful to talk to someone in your workplace around, I got out of the wrong side of bed. I spilled my coffee on the way to work. I didn't have time to get another coffee, so I'm non-caffeinated and I haven't had breakfast and I haven't gone to the gym, so I'm not the nicest person right now. Okay. What are we going to do about it? Because you can't stay like that. It's not helpful to anyone. And if you make appointments with clients, stick to them. If something comes up, cancel, tell the client. If you're unable to do it until the last second or, God forbid, after the appointment has passed, apologize where it's safe to do so, explain what happened. Now, if you've had a personal emergency that isn't safe for you to share, don't share that. But you might say, I had something happen in my personal life. I really do apologize because I respect that that has impacted you, me not showing up, and that was your time as well. And I really am sorry. It was unpreventable. I did have to address it. I did have to do something. I did have to look into it. And I apologize that your time was wasted in that. I'll do my very best to not let that happen again. And also, when can we meet next? That might be the way you go about it. And with service providers, if you say you're going to send some notes, if you say you're going to show up for a case conference, if you say you're going to send some information, do that. Got a video here on strengths-based. No, we're not watching it. You'll watch that later on. You should get that video tomorrow or the next day when they send out the recording. I apologize. I don't know why these are working and I haven't been provided the links to them, but from my understanding, they're sent out with the class recording and the slides in due course after tonight. So we're going to move through that. Your organization, wherever you work right now, if you're working, will have policies and procedures. You might work in HR, you might work in media, you might work in marketing, you might work in hospitality. You will have policies and procedures. You need to know these on some level. I do not know every policy and procedure. I work in HR. Do you know how many policies and procedures there are? I don't know because there are that many. But I know most of them and I have an idea of if I needed to find information where I could find them. And if someone asked me a question about, for example, about leave entitlements or about WHS requirements, I could give some brief information. I could give a lot more in WHS than I could in leave. And I can also point people to the right direction. And then I can find that information for myself as well. So wherever you are, be aware of your policies and procedures. Your policies are the things that need to be done and how. And then your procedures are your actions, how you do that. Policies and procedures stay into effect. Different organizations have different rules. It could be 2 to 7 years. They could be reviewed yearly. They could be reviewed every 2 years. Again, different rules around that. Some things will be decided for you. For example, WHS requirements. These are put out by Safe Work New South Wales and the if you're in New South Wales and or Safe Work Australia, but there will be a Safe Work Victoria, a Safe Work Tasmania, and so on. And the WHS Act of 2011, and a whole lot of privacy acts, confidentiality, anti-discrimination, so on. All these are put out by the federal government already for you. And in terms of WHS, for example, safe work determines what a safe workplace is, what is unsafe, the process that organizations should have in place to report. And then your organization will take that and go with it. So it'll apply that. And for example, how to report, different organizations will have different systems and software programs to do so. So most of it is done by the federal government or the state or territory government and or bodies that work under that, like Safe Work Australia. And then your organization puts them in a nice little binder, puts them on nice little templates on the intranet, and you can find them. If you don't know the ins and outs of the WHS Act and policy and procedure, for example, that's okay. I encourage you to know as best as possible the privacy, confidentiality, and disclosure policies and procedures. Now, knowing those acts and legislations, that's a whole minefield. I don't expect you to remember all of that, but knowing what is okay and not okay at a very core level is really important in the work that you do. I'd be very aware from the get-go in terms of confidentiality and practice your confidentiality speech. This speech goes a little like all of the information that you share with me, everything that you share with me will be kept confidential. It's just between you and me and whoever you decide you wish to share information with, or you wish me to share on your behalf. And we'll cover that when we talk about the consent form. Where confidentiality has its limits is if I am worried about your safety, or I'm worried about the safety of others around you because of some behavior you might be engaging in. So I want to ensure that you are safe and others around you are safe. So if at some point you share with me something that I think puts you or others in danger, or you report to me or you share with me some illegal behavior, that is something that I am mandated to report. So I will report to police, I will report to child protection, I will report to the mental health line, to your next of kin or the person you've listed as your emergency contact. I will try to tell you when that might be on the cards, and then there might be occasions, I hope not, where something might be quite urgent and I need to do so. So I want you to be aware that confidentiality is really important, and what you say to me will be maintained. However, if it goes into those territories of being unsafe or illegal, I have to report that. Whether we are unhappy about it or not, I have to report that. Are you okay if we continue? Yes. Could you sign this confidentiality form? Wonderful. Thanks. Let's move on. So that is my opening spiel in so many words. Change it a little depending on the age. If I know that there is an intellectual difference, that's essentially it. And those are, no matter what state and territory you're in, those are the general guidelines of confidentiality. You don't tell anyone unless someone is a risk to themselves or to others. Someone, a young person is at risk of significant harm. Someone's telling you about illegal activity. When I used to work with young people in the youth justice system, I obviously made this very clear from the get-go, and I would make it very clear during appointments. If they start telling me that they were hanging out with someone they shouldn't, and all of a sudden they've got a spray can, and then all of a sudden someone's got a knife, and before I know all this, you usually get a sense of if someone wants to share some things with me, and I say, hey, what are we going to talk about here? And am I going to, pardon me, am I going to make a phone call to the police after that? Now, I wasn't in the business of reporting kids every time they did something silly. If I had a feeling that someone was doing something unsafe and very wrong, or just wrong, doesn't mean to be very wrong, just wrong, I would let that conversation happen and I would make that report because I want the young person safe and I want members of the community, their friends, safe as well. But if I've got someone about to tell me about their pot use and the party they went to that they shouldn't have gone to, I don't want to know that. I don't want to make a report about that. I want to help kids not call the police or call their parent every single time. Again, use your common sense, use your thoughts around what do I need to do here? Talk to a manager as well. We have a concept with duty of care, and we have dignity of risk. Duty of care is ensuring the safety of yourself and those around you and your clients and your colleagues and operating safely. And dignity of risk is giving people the opportunity to make their decisions and take risks. I always give an example of a 17-year-old boy who has autism, and this boy wants to go skydiving for his 18th birthday. The boy has parents, the boy has family. He's working with a service provider on life skills, but the boy wants to go skydiving. What do you think about that? Do you think that's okay for the boy to go skydiving? Do you think that's not okay? There is no wrong answer. There are considerations. Your thoughts. Jump in when you want to share something. No thoughts?
What were his issues again, Christina?
So 17-year-old boy has autism. You're working with him around living skills, life skills. The boy wants to go skydiving for his 18th birthday.
Well, I don't see that it would go against my duty of care. I feel I would have to inform him of whatever the possible risks are, but once he turns 18, it's up to him to make his own decision.
Mhm.
As long as I've yeah, helped him make an informed decision, I would believe that it's his dignity of risk to be able to make his own choice.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ben. An important thing you mentioned there is informed consent. We all, most of the time, have or should have informed consent when we sign up to a gym membership, sign up to Apple Music, buy a new car, get a mortgage. You should have and do your due diligence for yourself and those around you to have informed consent, to understand what are the risks, what are the benefits to engaging in this, whatever this is. So for the case of skydiving, if this young boy can understand and comprehend and repeat back to you what the risks are, what the benefits might be, talk about why he wants to go skydiving, and if he has, and you can get from him full consciousness that he understands what the risks might be, he will be no different to anyone else who may not have autism jumping out of a plane with another human strapped to them who is qualified to do so. So if 17-year-old kid understands this, wonderful. Jump out of the plane. If 17-year-old kid with or without autism does not understand this, I am not encouraging kid to jump out of plane. I'm not encouraging 25-year-old person to jump out of plane if they do not understand that skydiving comes with the exhilaration that you might be seeking and also the risk of death. The risk is very low, but it's a possibility. We make an informed choice every day if you drive or you get on public transport. I don't mean to be a downer, but those activities come with risks, yeah? The risks are very, very low, but they are there. And you make informed choices about how you go about your day and how you get to places. So, duty of care, to do everything you can in your role to keep people safe and to keep themselves safe. And also dignity of risk if they can make their own decisions with informed consent, with all the information possible. Informed consent is knowing everything possible about the situation, about what you're getting into, about what you're deciding. You make those decisions, as I said, and I imagine when you go into something new, you think about what is the benefit for me? What are the risks? What is the cost? What is the time? How will this impact me positively, negatively? And you make decisions. You want to help clients make those decisions as well. Ethics are the funny legal system that you operate internally based off your experience, based off your learnings, based off your worldview, what you think is okay, not okay, right and wrong. If you progress, if you go into another profession of, say, being a qualified therapist, a counselor, a psychologist, you will be bound by ethical considerations. You are bound as a caseworker, as a community worker, as a support worker. When you enter other professions such as counseling, psychotherapy, psychology, general practice, you enter really binding ethical considerations that you could get in big trouble for not maintaining. In your world, I want you to think about what seems okay or not okay, and what does my gut feeling say about this? Generally speaking, I don't think you need to question ethics on daily. I think you make these conscious decisions about what to do, where to go, how to do, how to be, which are ethically sound. So I don't think this is a common thing for most people to come up. Where you might be challenged is, for example, religious beliefs. You might have a different belief to a client. That is wonderful. That is perfectly okay. You be mindful of not passing on your beliefs to a client, and you be mindful and respectful of how you interact with a client who wants to share their beliefs. You have no obligation to take on anyone's beliefs about anything, but how you communicate to a client is going to make or break the relationship. Now, they might feel quite strongly on their religious beliefs. Wonderful. Nothing wrong with that. Doesn't have to be yours. You don't have to engage in a conversation for an hour, for example, on religious beliefs if that's not something for you. And how you respond and communicate and share that respectfully to the client is important. If you see something unethical in your workplace, I'm not talking about taking stationery. It's not the best practice. Have I taken a pen or two in my life? Yes, I have. Have I printed something at work once or twice? Yes, I have. Your organization will have parameters around personal use. Most organizations are okay for you to make a phone call at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday because you work Monday to Friday, and the only time you can get another business that works Monday to Friday is to call Monday to Friday. Yeah? Don't spend 7 hours a day doing your personal life stuff. That's unethical. And your manager won't love that all that much. But if you come across unethical behavior in your workplace, you are required to report that. I would start by having a conversation with a colleague, with someone that you are seeing this unethical behavior. They may not be aware, they may be in their own world, they may have stuff going on. We don't know. You can start by having a conversation with them. And should you need to report it to a manager, I encourage you to do so. Not saying things when things are not right is not right as well. But be mindful of trying to understand the situation entirely with what information you have or what you can gather, and go from there. We all have bias. Human beings have bias. That is based on our experience, that is based on our upbringing, our teachings, our formal education, our informal education, how we view the world, what has happened to us, what has happened around us. We all have bias. What you do with that is what matters. I might have shared last week. If not, I'll just briefly highlight, if there is a client population that you are not comfortable working with, then where possible, don't work with that client group. Now, where things might get a bit tricky is if you work in a multidisciplinary environment and you have clients with lots of different needs, and a client comes in with a particular need or a situation that doesn't sit well with you, that is an environment that you don't want to work in. That might be a bit challenging if you have to work with clients because they've come into the service that you already work for. Have a conversation with your manager, talk about what is going on for you and why that isn't a place for you. It might not be safe for you. You might not feel you have the experience for it. It might not be something that you agree with, and that's okay. I've known workers who don't agree with alcohol and other drug use. They don't work in that space. They acknowledge that. They don't work in that space. It is better for them and it's better for clients that they do not work in that space. So if that comes up for you, or a client presents a situation that you feel is not right, think about duty of care, dignity of risk, bias, and is it important? And how do you go about, if you are talking about what you think and feel about the situation? Probably your thoughts and feelings, not super important to share, unless we're delving into that world of illegal or wrong or unsafe. But if they're not your views, and the client is not unsafe to themselves or to others, is not engaging in illegal behavior, is not causing a risk of harm to a young person, to an older person, if they're doing something that you don't necessarily agree with, so be it. I'm sure you do things that maybe not everyone else likes as well. So be mindful of your bias and how, because it will impact your work at some point. Whatever your biases are, they will come into play at different points in your career and your life. So just try to recognize when that comes up for you and acknowledge it and think about what's coming up and why, and what do I do about it. We've spoken about reporting requirements. Now, a super quick activity. Here in this space, I just want you to go and Google, Yahoo, whatever search internet browser you use. I want you to look up the, write these down, the duty of care, the mandatory reporting, and the privacy guidelines, acts, policies in your state. Duty of care, mandatory reporting, privacy in your state or territory. So stay in this space, open up a web browser and have a look for those 3 items in terms of a legislation, a policy, an act relative in your state or territory. Privacy. So let me bring that up again. We were looking at duty of care, mandatory reporting, privacy. Okay. Can someone in New South Wales share the legislation act for duty of care?
Hi, Christina.
I
Did
did.
you want it shared on the screen or
Oh, you could
what
just
it is?
verbalize the name.
It's the WHS, or was it Work Health and Safety Act 2011 for New South Wales?
Okay, covers duty of care.
Yep.
Brilliant. Thank you. Could someone in Victoria share what the mandatory reporting act legislation is in Victoria? No Victorians? Oh, got one come through. Thank you. Someone in Queensland. Could you share what the name of the Privacy Act is in Queensland?
Hi, Christina.
Hi.
Right, the Privacy Act 2009 in Queensland recognises the importance of protecting the personal information of individuals. Contains a set of rules or privacy principles that govern how Queensland government agencies collect, store, use, and disclose personal information.
Brilliant. Thank you. Do we have anyone from Western Australia? Can you share a duty of care act policy legislation? Western Australia. No. Okay. I see some coming through the chat as well. Thank you. Won't go through all the states and territories. If you feel so inclined to share, if I haven't named yours, go for it. Okay. I will just bring up a couple of last slides before we end for this evening. So, individual support plans are typically a title used for someone, firstly, with a diagnosed condition. That could be physical, intellectual, emotional, social. They're not always titled individual support plans. Generally speaking, what you do, the work that you do with clients should be individual. No two clients are the same. But particularly with clients that are working with several service providers, there might be one individual support plan that all service providers contribute to or have a part in contributing to support the client. This support plan will look at the needs of the person and will look at risks associated as well. It'll look at goals and strategies. And there's a whole lot to goal setting, which will be covered if you haven't already in future subjects. Goals can change. Goals should be very specific to the individual. How each service provider, if there are a few people involved, will support the goals. So for example, as the caseworker working on social engagement, for example, I might detail in the plan, the client will be part of writing this plan. They may not want to actually write, you might write, but they need to be part of the plan gathering and putting together and then doing. But I might support around finding social engagements relative to the person's interests in playing chess, in collecting coins, for example. Might support the client to go to these group sessions, group activities. Might support the client to join online teams and workshops or something. You need to consider safety in the physical environment. You need to consider safety in the online environment. And we need to look at cybersecurity risks and whatnot, and ensuring that the client is entering a safe space that is what it's meant to be and not a complete hoax and something that's unsafe and dangerous. And also, if there are other avenues of support that are listed there, maybe you don't have provision or awareness of what that is, but the client might write that there on their support plan, and that's wonderful. The client might also write things that they do with a family member or friends. They might also write, and it can be very helpful to have a daily schedule as well. Lots of people write out that find it helpful to have wake up 8 a.m., 9 a.m., breakfast, shower, make the bed, tidy the bedroom, tidy the house, go out, check the mail, put the bins out, bring the bins in, depending on their living circumstances, walk a pet. You know, that could be really helpful for a client as well, to have a breakdown of times and activities throughout the day. All of what you see here needs to be included, considered in an individual support plan. Making sure it's the client's plan and not your plan. You're there to help, it's their plan. So that covers our content for this evening. So I will close off the recording and thank everyone for listening there.